Hey, what's happening, everybody? It's me, Robert Phoenix, and yes, I am streaming live here. It is Sunday night, and this is Sunday Night AstroLive. As you can see, I'm playing with a green screen behind me, and so anything could happen with the green screen. It could fall. I could have a rosy and/or Jasper moment, and the whole thing could just go back into being like just a regular old room, which is really what it is. But for now, it's kind of cool, and it looks like it's a portal, which is like I've got this portal that's kind of opening up behind me, and all you got to do is just kind of jump through it, right? Such as the magic of technology. Who do we have here? We got Welsh Roses. Well, hello, Welsh Roses. How are you? Good to see you. Nancy Dickerson. There's Joan S. Hello, the lovely and talented Joan S. There's Michelle. Hi, Michelle. Yeah, that's pretty cool, huh? I mean, it's just a backdrop. That's all it is. The Bodie abides. What's going on? Mr. Bodie. What's happening? Good to see you. Let's see. Who else do we have here? Michael Pafford. Greetings, Michael. Happy Sunday. Ryan, the introspective woodworker, is with us. Thor to door, my man with the hammer. Good to see you, Steve. I might lean back a little. If I do, the portal might collapse, though. You never know. So the idea is I actually ordered a larger green screen so that I can take full advantage of these effects and have a very spiffy operating studio. But for now, it's kind of cool in that I'm in this like zone right over here. There's something else going on over here outside, but I'm happy with it for the night. It's cool. All right, who else do we have? Thomas Jordan, what's going on? TJ, my man, good to see you. PB's here. Hello, PB. Frank Bry. Frank, have you run into Owen Benjamin up there in Idaho? Boy, I've been reading some shit about Owen Benjamin over the weekend. So Owen's got 10 acres up in Idaho, Barataria, and there's some interesting local action happening with Owen. Apparently, the county commission, the people that hand out permits and zoning and all that, are not really happy with Owen and his plan. They think that he's going to start another kind of white supremacist compound in Idaho. I don't think Owen is capable of that, by the way. I was re-examining Owen Benjamin's chart, and it's very interesting. His true node is in Leo, which means that he's, part of his expression in this lifetime is to develop a healthy ego and to theoretically, play the role of being a leader, because that's what having the true node in Leo is about. And he's gotten into acting, and he's been on stage, and he's living his life. I mean, he's actually activating his true node. However, with the South Node in Aquarius, he's got no business starting a community. I can tell you that right now. He was also born during the last Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in the sign of Libra, and both of them are, at that time when he was born, they were retrograde. He has a pretty interesting chart. He doesn't have any water in his chart except for Uranus, which was in Scorpio. And people that don't have Uranus, don't have a lot of water in their chart, sometimes they can suffer from a lack of empathy and compassion, theoretically. But he does have a Neptune-Mercury opposition. And so I was looking at, there's a whole subreddit that's been dedicated to like taking him down. There are a lot of people who do not like Owen Benjamin, and I think that's the Neptune-Mercury opposition in his chart, because that could be scandalous with a Neptune-Mercury opposition. Things that you theoretically say, right, with Mercury. He has Mercury in Gemini. He's an uber Gemini. He has Mercury, Venus, and the Sun all in Gemini. And he's got a really strong trine between Saturn and Jupiter to his Sun. So Owen has an interesting chart. Like it's funny, E. Michael Jones. I didn't know this, by the way, but E. Michael Jones supposedly was responsible for helping Milo Yiannopoulos address his gay demons. And Milo's conversion to Catholicism is due in large part to Michael Jones, E. Michael Jones, which is interesting. So Michael Jones, or E. Michael Jones, or Professor Jones, however you want to say his name, has a magazine called Culture Wars. And there was a big piece in Culture Wars that was written not by Michael, although Michael is quoted, and it has to do with Owen Benjamin. And Owen actually had Michael on his show at least one time, maybe more. And Michael called him a wizard, and who leads people astray. That's what he said or that's what was written in this article in Culture Wars. I haven't read it. But Owen Benjamin does have wizard-like, and he has a wizard chart. There's a lot of heavy air magic in Owen Benjamin's chart. I think he might even have an Aquarian moon. If it's not an Aquarian moon, it is like the final degrees of Capricorn. I don't know his birth time. I just looked at his chart, but he does have a quote unquote wizardly chart. I can see that. But this Neptune-Mercury opposition, not so good. It can be scandalous, definitely on the scandalous side. Anyway, just a little bit of Owen Benjamin stuff, a little Owen Benjamin astro gossip, even though he doesn't believe in astrology. But he's having a challenging time up in Idaho with his property. I wonder if Frank has run across any of that stuff since Frank lives up there. Miles Copeland. Hello, Miles Copeland. Ani, hey, what's going on, Ani? Good to see Flap 77 is here. Gucci to Goats. What's going on, G to G? Janine Deal. Yes, you may thank Chatlandia, of course. So Welsh Roses had a bit of a fundraiser, a GoFundMe, to help her escape the gravity of liberal Montana to move into a new gravity. I guess she's going to become Owen Benjamin's neighbor. She's going to be moving in with Owen Benjamin up on his property. No, I'm just kidding about that. But she is going to Idaho. Hey, what's going on, EC2189 Kaku? Good to see Marie MacArthur is here. He lives north of me in Bonners Ferry. Now, Frank, can you tell me that they're like really slack with zoning and ordinances up there? Can you tell me that? And yet they're kind of busting his chops over it. It's kind of interesting. Let's see who else we have. Soli, hey, what's going on, Soli? Nice to see you. Hope you guys are doing well. There's Jennifer Rubin from LA. What's going on, Jennifer? And there she is, Christine Mose, also known as Cremo. Susan Cano, nice to see you. Macronomicus in the house. I like that. MK, what's going on, MK? April Himmel, just read Astrological report on Fauci. Eclipse is exposing many secrets about COVID with Mercury retrograde. Oh yeah, we talked about that, didn't we? There's more to come. Definitely more to come on that front. Let's see, who do we have here? We have Nancy Dickerson. I didn't know there was a liberal Montana. Well, just ask Welsh Roses about that. She knows all about the liberal side of things. Steve Letro, what's going on? He's having a beautiful day in Easton, Maryland. God bless you. Frank says, probably the folks up there are freaked. He wants to start a community. I don't think Owen wants to start a community. I think Owen wants to have a place for himself and a few of his Beartarian friends. I don't think Owen wants to start a community. I don't think Owen is capable of starting a community. The only Earth Owen has in his chart is Mars, and it's in Taurus. And his Mars is afflicted with a conjunction with Chiron. So he has a Mars-Chiron conjunction, which is an aspect of a deeply wounded male and a wounded relationship with other men. But he's got that strange connection with his father. I don't think Owen has, like, if you're going to start a community, you got to have a lot of Earth in your chart. When I say community, I'm not talking about a cult. That's different. A community is something that's like super sustainable, and that you get up every day and you do the same thing over and over again. Doesn't matter, what the conditions are. That there's a level of consistency and there's a level of fortitude. That's how you start, or that's how you can foster a physical community. You have to be able to do that. I remember one time, I've told this story before, I'll tell it again, it's worth sharing. So in 1990, it was the summer of 1990, and I was trying to find a place to live. And here's Jasper, he may knock down the portal. It could happen. I was trying to find a place to live, and I had no money. I had just come out of a separation. I was living in Seattle. I had a car, a dog, and I actually had a cat that had kittens. So I'm driving around with this cat with a box of kittens. I swear to God, that was my life. And so I just come out of my Saturn return, and I was trying to find a place to live. And somebody had suggested that it was a psychic, actually. She gave me a bunch of places that would be good for me to move to. And the list was Charlottesville, Virginia, Raleigh, North Carolina, Santa Fe, New Mexico, Flagstaff, Arizona, Portland, Oregon, and someplace just above the U.S.-Canadian border on the Canadian side in Montana. I had no idea what that place was. It was just a place she found. Hold on 1 second. So since I didn't have a lot of money and I was kind of close to Portland, I decided, well, let me go check out Portland. So I went to Portland, and I was looking through I think, what do they call it? The Willamette Weekly. And in the back, they actually had places to rent or live. And I answered an ad, and it was an ad for somebody that they were looking for somebody to rent a room in this place. It was a community, and it just happened to be on a street called, of all names, Morris Street. I'm thinking, well, this is kind of interesting. Let me go check it out. So I went there, and it was an interesting scene, I have to say. There was a group of people who created like an urban farm. And across the street from where they had this really big house, they had this fairly large-sized field. And they were farming. They were farming vegetables, and that was their thing. It was their business. And they had a leader for this community. And I remember, like, I had to sit down and talk with him. And he came in. He was this guy. He had long hair, and I remember he had one of his fingers missing. And he had been out in the fields. He had been out in the fields, working in the field across the street. Like I said, it wasn't some little, small patch of land. It was a pretty good sized piece of land across from this house. And he'd been there, you know, all day, you know, doing his thing. And he just taken a shower. So I sat down and had dinner with him. And he wanted to know why I wanted to live there. And I told him, about my, you know, experience with porn, whatever. And this guy was kind of radical. And he said, you know, we don't give a fuck about the outside world. You know, we're just here for each other. That's what we're here for. You know, if we, you know, we all trust each other. We all have each other's back. And if we wanted to go away for a few days, you know, go up to the mountains or something, we have kids, we have somebody that we can leave our kids with and trust them. That's what we're about. And he was pretty radical about that. I wouldn't say radical. He was passionate. Let's say passionate would be the word. And especially his disdain over the quote unquote public space, or not the public space, but just society in general. And I get it. You know, all this time down the line, like these people were way ahead. They were way ahead of it. Like they had figured something out. And I don't know whatever happened to that community. You know, I didn't pass the test, whatever the test, and I'm okay with that. I don't think that it would have been a good situation for me in general. I needed to go do something else at that time, and you know, and the esteemed wisdom of the guy. I mean, you know, he knew that. But that's what he did. He was out in that lettuce field, or whatever they were growing. He was there all, and that's what you have to do. You know, you've got to be able to roll up your sleeves. And Ben Balderson, who has been on the show, and I want to have Ben back on. He's been on the Friday show, and again, you know, this is a guy who, you know, moved up to the Siskiyou region of California, way up north, kind of very close to the Oregon border. And all he does is, you know, all he does is work. I mean, when you have a community, that's what you do. Unless you have a community and you're a cult leader, in which case you get everybody else to do your shit for you. And there's, you know, there are examples of that. Jim Jones, of course, being one of them. But you know, I think in order to do that, astrologically, you've got to have some Earth. You've got to have some staying power, and some Taurus, not just Mars and Taurus with the Chiron conjunction, or Capricorn, and a fair amount of it. You know, Owen's chart has a lot of mutability. He's got some cardinal energy, obviously, with that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, but they're both retrograde. So it's interesting, because there can be gains and there can also be reversals with the retrograde. Anyway, just again, just a little snapshot and synopsis of, maybe next week we'll take a dive into his chart. But I was very surprised to find out that E. Michael Jones was involved in the, how do you say it, the Reformation of Milo Yiannopoulos, in getting Milo to embrace, I guess, Catholicism, right? I think then Milo has renounced his homosexuality. And E. Michael Jones doing the work, for whatever that's worth. And I do like Michael. I think he's brilliant. You can tell though he's getting older. I remember the first time I interviewed Michael was 2015. I think it might have been 2015. So that was 6 years ago. And that was when I was living in Austin. And 6 years later, you can tell he's gotten older. Paul sent me a clip of Eric Clapton. And it's about a 24, 25-minute interview of Eric Clapton. And you can tell Eric Clapton is just, he's old. He's got that, you know how when somebody gets old, all of a sudden they have this kind of frail energy. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like they have this kind of frail energy. Like they don't have that kind of like edge that a certain type of youth brings to them. It's kind of it's mixed with a little uncertainty, you know, and every now and then they get that kind of fuzzy look in their eyes. And I've noticed that with people when they reach a certain age, and Clapton has it. And then he got 2 shots, he got 2 jabs, and of course he's lamenting that. I'm going to talk tomorrow about the severity of what's happened. I'm not going to talk about that tonight, not on this channel, because I put a video up on my Twitter page. Some of you follow me on Twitter. It's well worth watching. It's about 2 minutes and 45 seconds. And I'm not going to broach the subject matter tonight. But tomorrow on 15 Minutes of Flame, if you want to dive in on it, I am going to dive in on it. And the reason why, well, I would talk about it here, but you know what happens when you talk about certain things here. And I would talk about it here as it relates to the next eclipse, the next great American eclipse, because the timing around what's in that video corresponds with the timing of the next great American eclipse. So I'll cover that tomorrow. And of course, that's 15 Minutes of Flame with an OV. And tune in tomorrow. We'll get into it, because I think that that's going to, connecting that video up with the subject matter of that video and the eclipse is a big deal. It's a big deal. Okay, so tonight we're gonna cover a lot of ground. Apparently, Netanyahu is out in Israel. This is a pretty big thing for a number of reasons. Now, the timing of Netanyahu being out also corresponds with the G7. Don't think that these things aren't connected, because they are. Now, the G7 people, they're just hand puppets. That's all they are. They're nothing but hand puppets. Whether it's Joe Biden or Boris Johnson or Justin Castro, they're all just hand puppets. The only one that's probably not a hand puppet is Abe from Japan. He's probably not a hand puppet. Like, I think you have got to be pretty well connected in Japan to get to a position like that. The rest are deeply compromised. Macron is such a hand puppet, he got slapped last week. The guy slapping was wearing a mask too. I don't know, maybe that was strategic. Maybe he thought he wouldn't be identified if he slapped him, but of course he was. And they brought him in. But the hand puppets are there. And Biden, of course, looking even more feeble than Eric Clapton. And I'm not here to diss Eric Clapton. I thought his video was touching and kind of heartbreaking in a lot of ways. He got the double vax because, well, he's planning on touring. And he said that he did it for his kids. I don't know. Maybe he did. Maybe that was part of his justification. But he's trying to tour. And Eric Clapton has a dark past. Eric Clapton's got some real skeletons in his closet. He's got the thing with George Harrison and Patty Harrison. Of course, the song Layla is for her, and he wound up having an affair with her while she was still married to George Harrison. And the whole recording of that record, Layla, with Derek and the Dominos, which features Duane Allman, is kind of a big deal. According to some people, that's really where Duane Allman gets hooked on heroin, is during the sessions of that record. And it's not long after that Duane Allman has that motorcycle wreck. And a year later, almost to the day, Barry Oakley has a motorcycle wreck like a block away, like a bunch of high strange. That all happens in Eric Clapton's world. And then you have the absolutely tragic event of this kid falling out of the building, the high rise. Oh my God! I mean, that's like heavy stuff, and that's where the whole kind of like sacrifice chatter comes into play. Like I remember when that happened, and people who were onto that sort of thing were talking about, oh well, that's Clapton's sacrifice in order for him to be a rock and roll god. And I've told a story about somebody who did series of recordings, sessions at Eric Clapton's place in the Bahamas, which I will not repeat here on this broadcast because it has a number of different names involved with it and activities involved with it that I don't want to talk about here. But I've people that I know I've shared the story with, and the guy that shared the story with me is very credible. He wouldn't lie. He's the son of a well-known Bay Area musician, beloved Bay Area musician. And this guy's a musician himself. So Clapton he's got kind of a dark past. He's got some skeletons in his closet. And now and again, I mean, this is a guy that, had to deal with the needle. He had to deal with the needle down in Florida. That whole time with Derek and the Diamond. You listen to that song, Layla, that is a fucking heroin song. I mean, it's dripping with, like, it's opiated. It's a great record. I think it's in Bell Bottom Blues on that record too, so it's a great album. Derek and the Dominoes. But I feel for him. Even though he might have some of this stuff going on, I definitely feel for him. I'll play a little of that interview tomorrow on the other show. Again, because he talks about things that here on this channel are not necessarily going to be that well received by the algorithms. And I tell you, man, we all have a road to hoe, and sometimes it's really hard. And it's very easy to judge certain people. It'd be very easy to kind of judge somebody like Eric Clapton in his past, and you kind of see what he is going through now. It's like, I wouldn't want to be that guy. And the really weird thing about the interview is, this is the thing that's startling about the interview, is how number one, how uninformed he is. That I thought was really interesting. And number two, how alone he is. Like, he had nobody to talk to about the you-know-what. He had nobody. I thought that was mind-blowing. And then he did that too with Van Morrison, which got a lot of attention. And what's odd is the timing. I'm not quite sure entirely about the timing, but I think that he wound up, having the double dose after he did that record, and that's what I think. And I'm not sure. Again, the reasoning, the rationale behind it is kind of mind-blowing. But you think about somebody who has all that money. We think he's got a lot of money. Maybe that's one of the reasons why he's touring. I don't know. Maybe he needs the money. I mean, the way that these people are hit with taxes and how they get bled, and some of them have to tour in order to keep the money train coming in. It's like Don Henley. Don Henley hires up to 16, I think upwards of 16 people to just go on the internet and put copyright claims in for any Eagles song, so that they're not losing money, theoretically. Is that interesting? Anyway. But that interview is kind of sad, and I wouldn't want to be Eric Clapton, especially now. Now, after he's taken the spike, no. Even before then, I wouldn't want to be Eric Clapton. Anyway, and he's an Aries. I mean, he said Van Morrison's fearless. And he's right. Van Morrison is fearless. Van Morrison is no Aries. Van Morrison's a Virgo. Eric Clapton's an Aries. Van Morrison understands health. See, that's the difference. Although I'm sure Van, who knows, maybe he's lost a little weight. I haven't seen him in a man, he was looking a little rotund there for a while. But anyway, there's a little bit of a foray into pop astrology. It's, I haven't done Clapton's chart, but being an Aries, he's going to have some proximity with Chiron with his sign, as most Aries people have, and will be, which is kind of a big deal. It makes Aries a little more vulnerable when they have to deal with Chiron. That is for damn sure. Okay, we have a lot of ground to cover tonight. I've been talking for about 33 minutes, most of which has been sort of astrologically related, if you think about it. And tonight, I'm going to get into very specific topics. I'm going to talk about CyberPolygon, which is a conference that's happening on July 9th. So I pulled the chart up for CyberPolygon. Now, this is the second year that they've done CyberPolygon. CyberPolygon is run by Klaus Schwab and Davos. And it's all part of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, AKA the reset, the Great Reset. And what was interesting about last year were the participants. The keynote speaker was a guy from Russia. And if you look at the countries and you look at like the tech and banking institutions that were pretty big participants last year in CyberPolygon, they were all linked to places like Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan and that part of sort of Eurasia and Russia. There's a lot of connections with these corporations, banks, and tech corporations, specifically for that part of the world. So whatever was going on last year with CyberPolygon was meant to bring in that part of the world, which has been kind of this interesting, weird sort of outpost. Now, we've gotten into Kazakhstan before with Steve Kremie and Chris Kremie, and we looked at Astana. And it seems as though, even though Steve would probably have a bit of a fit, but it does seem as though Astana does have some Tartarian kinds of remnants. Now, not everything there is reminiscent of old Tartaria. I mean, clearly there's some very new structures that are there. But that part of the world is an emerging part of the world. And that city specifically was guided, built, and engineered by a group of Americans, which we've talked about. And one of the players around Astana is the guy that runs Lionsgate in Uranium One. He's a huge player. Speaking of Uranium One and the Clintons, did you see that the guy who broke the story on the Clintons being on the tarmac, or Bill Clinton being on the tarmac with Loretta Lynch, that guy's dead? Did you see that? He's 47 years old. What I didn't realize about that guy is that he had actually written a book. Not only did he break the story, this is interesting, right? This guy's from Alabama. He's like a local Fox News reporter in Alabama. And he broke the story. They got it on Fox News. And apparently he wrote a book. I had no idea this guy wrote a book about that event. That tells you something about our press. And 47 years old, and he's gone. Now, maybe there could be extenuating circumstances, because we know that there are people who are fairly young who are collapsing and dying due to certain circumstances. Specifically, the soccer player, I believe his name is Christian Henriksen, is that his name? Henriksen, the Finnish soccer player who collapsed on the pitch. And it is confirmed that he took the dose. It's confirmed. Team doctor said it. So it wouldn't be all that uncommon for this fellow who, let's find out his name. Let's give him some credit here. This is how bad our media is, because he broke the story, and it just kind of went it kind of went nowhere. His name is Christopher Sign. Isn't that an interesting name, Christopher Sign? Right, Christopher Sign, and Christopher, of course, is Christ, Christ over. Christ over. There's a sign here. This is very interesting in terms of just the symbolism of the name. He was 45 years old. 45. Former Phoenix reporter. So he was in Phoenix. So he was, I guess he was a reporter in Phoenix, and then he got a gig as an Alabama TV anchor. Christopher Sign. Interesting. Very interesting. I'll show you the guy here. What kind of ring does he have? No, I think he's from Alabama. I think he played football at Alabama. Let's zoom in on that ring. Let's see what we got here. Yeah, I think that's from the University of Alabama, where he played football. So this is the guy right here, Christopher Sign. What a name. Sign went on to tell Fox that the investigation made his life a living hell with his family, receiving death threats. My family received significant death threats shortly after breaking the story. He said, credit cards hacked. You know, my children, we have code words. We have secret code words that they know what to do. Whoa. So the Dallas area native headed to Alabama in 2017 to anchor the ABC station's evening news show after working for a TV station in Phoenix. That's where Sky Harbor is. He says, I don't understand why. This is Jamie Hale, the network's sports anchor. This is brutal. This is brutal. Chris was a tremendous leader in our newsroom, ABC 3340, Science Outlet, and the Saturday Tribune reporter. He worked with our reporting staff on a daily basis, but also worked behind the scenes with the I team and with news managers on coverage events. The obituary continued. You were very likely to get an email from him with a story idea in the middle of the night. He was passionate about journalism. Sign had 3 sons with his wife, Laura, whom he had met at the University of Alabama. That's the ring finger in the 1990s, where he manned the offensive line for the school's football squad, and she started as an all SEC volleyball player. That is rough. No, not as rough as that, Jesus. So there you go. Sign of Christ, the Christ sign. Interesting, very interesting. And like I said, he wrote a book. I didn't even know he wrote a book. And there you go. All right, so we're going to talk about CyberPolygon. It's coming up July 9th. We're going to look at the chart for CyberPolygon. We're also going to look at the chart for Israel, because Benjamin Netanyahu is out the door. Now remember, like I said, this comes during the G7. Remember, they're They're nothing but messenger boys and girls. That's all they are. They're grocery boys. That's what Marlon Brando called Martin Sheen. Willard called him a grocery boy in Apocalypse Now. They're just grocery boys and girls. That's all they are, except for maybe Abe. But it's interesting that this has happened during the G7 event, which means it's planned. And they could have pulled the string on Netanyahu at any time. Anytime. 12 years. He was in power for 12 years. And I guess they formed and the way that, they say that Israel is a democracy. It's the only democracy in the Middle East. Well, first of all, democracies aren't always the best thing. I would venture that Syria, not being a democracy, probably has better overall respect for its citizenry in many ways. And no matter what you think of Dubai, it's not a democracy, but shit gets done in Dubai, and there is a considerable amount of order in Dubai. And I'm not advocating it per se. I'm just saying that, just because it's a democracy, it may not be the best representative government in the Middle East. Am I right, Jasper? And democracies, by and large, tend to succumb to mob rule. That's why, theoretically, this is a constitutional republic. It has been moved into a state of being a democracy, and we're seeing now what that looks like. And it's not pretty. But even if somehow Israel was some sort of a constitutional republic, their style of how they actually elect somebody and how they have a new government is very different than ours. Very different. It's a little bit more like sort of the parliamentary style of British politics, but even then it's a little more arcane. So that means that Donald Trump, who's a major, let's just face it, Donald Trump is a Zionist. He's a Zionist, and he did everything in his power to bring Israel, and Sheldon Adelson. Let's not forget Sheldon Adelson. Sheldon Adelson, big supporter of Bibi Netanyahu, he's gone, right? So there's no Adelson in Netanyahu's corner. There's no Adelson in Trump's corner. So Netanyahu lost a kind of a major supporter with both of them. And because the Zionist faction, or the Likudniks, which Netanyahu represented, are kind of out now. That is a very interesting development, because through Netanyahu, theoretically, Israel is and has been more nationalist, because that's the nature of Zionism in some ways. And the Likud party is clearly a nationalistic party. And I'm not sure who's going to take the reins there, but I guarantee you it probably won't be a hardcore Zionist like Benny Netanyahu, who, by the way, went to high school in Pennsylvania. He went to high school right down the road from E. Michael Jones. So we're going to look at Israel's chart tonight, because they're going through major changes and will continue to go through major changes. It's just starting. Wait till next year. Next year will be a huge, perhaps even prophetically biblical year for Israel. We'll look at their chart. And we're also going to look at the chart of BlackRock. Now, the interesting thing around BlackRock is that it comes out of a company called Blackstone. Okay, Blackstone begat BlackRock, and they actually played around, although I don't think they were ever really serious about this, but they played around with calling the company Black Pebble. which is kind of ridiculous. So they formed a group, like a subgroup, inside of Blackstone. Of course, the person that's sort of the face of BlackRock is Larry Fink, but there's another major player named Robert Capito, who's just as important as Larry Fink. And they went public in 1999, on October 1st of 1999. And we're going to look at that chart. That's when they became a publicly traded company. So between the time when they got together and said, okay, we're going to become Blackstone, and I don't have a date for that. And I've searched quite a bit, but I did find the day that they were a publicly traded company. So we're going to use that date. Now, there are two very important times if we're going to look at that chart for BlackRock, or for any company for that matter. There is the pre-trading period, which is at 6:30 a.m. And that's Eastern, of course, Eastern time. And I think this would have been Eastern Daylight Time, October 1st, if I'm not mistaken. So it's not standard time yet. So there's that period before the whistle blows, or the bell rings, whatever the fuck they do. And that's when there's a lot of scuttlebutt and chatter, and things are getting filed. And then the opening bell is rung, and that's when all the trading starts. And that's at 9:30. So we're going to look at both of those charts. And of the two, I think the 9:30 chart is the one that is probably the one really worth paying attention to, especially as it relates to what BlackRock seems to be up to right now, which is, look at that, got the eclipse behind me and everything. The Death Star. BlackRock is the Death Star. That's what it is. It is the Star Wars Death Star. And it's been 33 years since those guys got together, and not just guys, of course, there's some women involved. 33 years when they sat down in 1988 and said, we're going to become BlackRock. Now, there's something that sets BlackRock apart. The thing that powered BlackRock as a business from the jump isn't just the brain trust. It's not just guys who know how to do trades inside and outside, but there's a software that's associated with BlackRock. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that software that is really fueled, number one, its IPO, its initial public offering, and to this day has been the thing that BlackRock has touted for not only its investors, but touted as its sort of equalizer, its great equalizer. We'll talk about that. It's also interesting that I think they're coming back to the BlackRock Desert this year, which is where Burning Man takes place. Now, there was no Burning Man last year, obviously, but I think it's coming back, if I'm not mistaken. And again, the symbolism there is BlackRock. And there's an interesting film with Spencer Tracy called Bad Day at BlackRock. I'm not a huge Spencer Tracy fan, but it's one of the better Spencer Tracy movies. And apparently Spencer Tracy breaks out some fucking karate moves in that film, which I've seen. It's a little lame, but for an old guy, for an old Hollywood pervert, he did okay. All right, we'll do a little invocation here, and then we'll bring up the chart in a moment. I want to talk about Mars, which is in Leo now, and it's the first time Mars has been in a fire sign since last year. We had Mars in Aries for most of the year, which, frankly, I miss. I liked having Mars in Aries. That was cool. Isn't that right, Jasper? Do you like Mars in Aries? You like Mars in Aries, too. But now we have Mars in a fire sign again, so things are going to heat up. They're definitely going to heat up. We'll talk a lot about that as well. All right, here we go. Dear, blessed, holy Mother, Father, God of the great central sun within the universal light, which is the light of Yeshua, Sananda, Emmanuel, Yasadoni, the highest and best. Wisdom, information, and truth come through this channel at this time, and in so doing, we affirm and decree the qualities of clarity and truthfulness, honesty, vulnerability, courage, and character, faith, heart, integrity, humor, flexibility, compassion, empathy, and above all, love. If there's any karmic residue in this stream, let it be clarified, purified, and removed at this time. Okay, let's get going. I'm going to bring up the chart of the moment. We're going to find out where the planets are. We're going to talk about Mars, a little bit about the eclipse. A lot of the BlackRock stuff started to come out around that eclipse. It started to kind of, I started looking at BlackRock about a day or two before, and all of a sudden the eclipse hit and BlackRock was trending right on Twitter. So let's look at the chart of the moment here. LeBron is distraught. LeBron is distraught by Kyrie Irving's injury. Kyrie's in Aries. Kevin Ware. Another story moment. Okay, here we go. Let's look at the it was the chart of the moment. What is this for? What is this for? Long Island? This isn't Long Island. I know what that's for. Give me 1 second here. A couple of months ago, I started watching this show on YouTube called Sea of Tranquility. If you guys are into 1970s and 80s and 90s music, if you're into progressive rock, natal, check that show out. It's a pretty cool show if you're into that sort of thing. And they talk about other bands, but it's basically a show run by this guy named Pete Prado, who lives in upstate New York. And he's just a total music head. And he has this guy named Martin Popoff on his show, and they talk about albums and all kinds of shit. I kind of got hooked into it for a while because they're a bunch of like really passionate music goofballs. And Martin's written a lot of books. He knows what he's talking about. And then Pete is really into like types of metal that I just can't go there. I can't go there. Like speedcore and grindcore and Swedish death metal. This is not my thing. Not my thing. I can listen to it and I can appreciate the jackhammer rhythms and all this shit, but it's not my thing. That's not what the show's entirely about, but he likes it. All right, let's check this out. Here's where we are. But they're nice guys. They're cool guys. I like them. All right, chart of the moment. So Mars has just moved. We're going to talk a little bit about Mars. Mars has just moved into Leo. We just went through a Mars Cancer phase. We have Venus in Cancer, obviously. But this is the first time Mars has been in a fire sign since last year, where it was in Aries for most of the year. So this is the first kind of wallop of fiery Mars. And we're also entering into the time where Sirius begins to rise. Heliacal Sirius will begin to rise in the east before the sun. This is the time now. We're coming into that time. So we're entering the dog days of summer. Esoterically, this is always a huge time of year when Sirius begins to rise. And it's also interesting that they planned the G7. I think they also planned the G7, not just around the eclipse, but with Polygon Sirius rising. Pretty sure of that. So we're going to have Mars in Leo, which means I just think it's going to get fucking hot, right? I mean, look at where the moon is. So we have the moon entered into Leo today, right? So we had this conjunction of the moon at 0, 1, now it's at 3. So we've had this moon Mars conjunction, Mars right at the inception point. So you know, I think we're going to have a really hot summer. To me, and by the way, it got really hot here. Like all of a sudden, it's summer now in Texas. And man, it is such a no bullshit heat. For now, we're going to be in summer for the next, let's see, June, July, August, September. Next 4 months, it will be, as they say in Massachusetts, wicked hot, wicked hot. And I think it's not just going to be here in Texas, but I think we're going to see some major heat. Although supposedly with the Farmer's Almanac, it's supposed to be a bit of a wet summer here. We'll see about that. If it is going to be a wet summer, it's going to be a hot, wet summer. I think we're going to have a lot of heat this summer. And I mean, astrologically, it's already kicking in. Which, if you look at sort of the next kind of domino to fall, we can talk about the dominoes. Of course, we had the domino of 2020, right? Which was the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. It was a big domino, huge. It was like, okay, this is it. This is the time. This is the reset. All chips are being pushed into the table. And we know what's happened since then. That hand's kind of played out in some ways. It's kind of played out. That doesn't mean that it will cycle back or cycle around, because it probably will. And we know this because certain governments have released their their fledgling version of a passport, which includes another version of what we're talking about. Oh, really? I see. Just like how we had a 2019 version of it. Well, on that passport, they inadvertently put a 2021 version on the passport. Oh, isn't that interesting? Huh. Are you foreshadowing a little bit about what's going to happen? So it will cycle back around again, but it's not going to happen now. It won't happen this summer. What we're going to have this summer, and I think we can really look at this Mars-Moon conjunction, right? Mars is just coming in. It is solar energy, right? Mars in Leo is hot. It's coming in hot. And it's right here, right at the beginning of heliacal Sirius rising. We get this moon in Leo, which is conjuncting Mars right at the beginning of the sign. That's going to give us an idea as to where we're going to be, basically between now and the middle part of October. At that point in October, Mars will move behind the sun, and you won't be able to see it. You won't be able to see Mars. It'll be in Libra. It'll be behind the sun. So between now and October, the sun, Mars, and it has been ever since it went into Aries, Mars has been visible to the naked eye and the naked sky. So, and it's been going through the personal signs. That's the other thing. Starting next year, or this year rather, in November, Mars moves into Scorpio and then goes through what we call the transpersonal planets. So Mars has been impacting people and impacting sort of personal institutions or personal lives, right? That's how it works through the personal signs. Mars in Cancer, what did we see? We saw a really aggressive real estate market, which we'll talk about tonight. It just, it was aggressive before, but when Mars went into Cancer, it just went up a whole other level, right? Cancer being homes and domestic products and things like that. And Mars just got super active. I also saw a lot of women get really mother bear-like with Mars and Cancer. I saw this one woman, you guys probably saw her last week. I think it was right around like Cancer 28, Cancer 29, close to being anoretic. And then she went off on the school board about the pornography in the textbooks. So I saw a lot of like, really kind of hardcore, intense mama bears during that Mars and Cancer stretch. Not just her, but there were others. There was this one gal from New York City, upstate New York. Man, did she let the fucking school board have it? And they would always tell her, well, your time is up. It's like, fuck you, my time is not up. We pay you. Well, no, we've outgiven, everything that's here, the chair you're sitting on, the electricity in this room, the air conditioning, everything, the insurance, we pay for it, right? So she nailed these guys. There was a lot of Mars and Cancer energy. Okay, that's over now. But like I said, we can see how this energy gets activated. We saw BlackRock really, in fact, kind of get outed in some ways, right around the 28th, 29th degree of Mars and Cancer. Of course, we're talking about tropical, right? We're talking about tropical astrology here. Western tropical astrology. We're not talking about sidereal astrology. So now that we have Mars and Leo, this is going to be a very interesting time. And, before it was in Leo, it was at the final degrees of Cancer. So we had this opposition with Pluto happening as well. And you can kind of tell like people have sort of had it. They've had it with things. Even here in Texas, at the local HEB, the home offices said no more masks. No more masks. So every employee now at HEB isn't wearing, because I think people have reached that kind of that oppositional kind of apex, right? With this Mars-Pluto opposition, and I think that institutionally, some of these corporations understand that. Not all of them, clearly in Houston, but again, that's a Mars-Pluto opposition. You had those nurses walk off the job because Houston Methodist just said, sorry, you've got to take the vaccine. You've got to take both shots of the vaccine. I think there are 140 of them. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Now, there are other states now that have followed, just because this private hospital in Texas set a standard. There are now other hospitals in other states now that are starting, look what they did. And a judge just shot down their ability to hear the case. Well, they'll take that case to a higher court. I'm not sure they're going to win, though. I think it's going to be a very difficult case to win. I think if they could win it, but they'd have to win it on different terms. They'd have to win it and prove that COVID is not valid and not real. Which, by the way, that may actually, that may happen at some point. It may happen at some point, but not now. That's not going to happen. But you can see, right, Mars, Cancer, nursing, caretakers, Aries, we're done. We're walking off the job. Also reaching this kind of high water mark where, again, if you were to go into Austin, and a month ago, everybody who worked at Whole Foods would be wearing a mask. That's not happening anymore. Every now and then you'll see an employee there who might wear a mask, but that's done. And even in People's Pharmacy, which is supposedly this, cool alternative compounding pharmacy, we were the biggest fucking mask Nazis in Austin. They're not even wearing masks anymore. So there's been this sea change, right, for better or worse. And I think it had something to do with this Mars-Pluto opposition. Now, Mars is still in opposition by degree, but it's going to start to separate itself. It's at a 5-degree orb right now, so it'll start to separate itself a little bit. But we'll still see some intensity with this Mars-Pluto opposition. And with Mars and Leo, you're going to see people become indignant, really indignant. And I'm actually looking forward to this Mars transit. Like I said, we haven't had any Mars really, like the Mars energy that we've had up till now, since we went through that Mars and Pisces, Jesus, at the beginning of 2021, Mars, are you kidding me? Man, that was so dispiriting. I was so despondent. That came on the heels of the bullshit on January 6th, and it was all Mars and Pisces. It just felt it's just like you had to cleanse yourself from that. And that's going to be interesting to see when Mars goes into Virgo. That's going to be a very interesting kind of update on what happened with those people in the Capitol. Because from what I understand, there's like 1,400 hours of footage that they have that they're sitting on, and most of it shows that nothing has happened. But there is footage of a group that looks a hell of a lot like BlackRock, and they are in there. And these guys are scary looking fuckers, right? You don't see that though. No, what you see is whoever was wearing those uniforms. I'm not even sure they were real Capitol Police, by the way. They were just letting people in, right? That's all that you've seen. So when Mars goes into Virgo, which is one Mars cycle away, it's going to be in opposition for what was going on in January when Mars went into Pisces. So that's going to be a very interesting set of developments. And especially as it relates to trying to do this witch hunt and try to turn January 6th into this really kind of treasonous event, which wants to brand and label anybody that disagrees with the dominant paradigm and the program that we're all supposed to adhere to. Anybody that disagrees with that is labeled an extremist. And they've been using that the January 6th event to enable the label. So when we get into Mars and Virgo, so I think it's going to get interesting, because I think we'll get some clarity, we'll get some fine points, we'll get some detail, we'll get some exactitude. As Mars goes into Virgo, but for now we got Mars in Leo, and it starts off with this in conjunct with Jupiter. With Jupiter at 2 degrees Pisces, hasn't gone retrograde yet, but it's about to go retrograde fairly soon. So we have this Mars in conjunct, which is interesting, because when we get into these in conjuncts, they become these puzzles that need to be solved, right? There's no clear path with an in conjunct. So we have Jupiter in Pisces, which theoretically is full of hope and faith and goodwill and a sense of kind of divinity, right? Jupiter in Pisces, it's got this sort of cosmic wholeness to it. Jupiter and Pisces, the two most theoretical, religious, philosophical signs/aspects. Jupiter ruler Sagittarius, Pisces, and Sagittarius being kind of more kind of orthodox law, canon, biblical canon and law. And Pisces tend to be more of the spirit, so we have this expansion of the spirit. And now we have Mars and Leo, and there's this in conjunct, and it's happening like right now. Like, what can we do? What can we do? How can we activate this sense that each and every one of us has of being divinely guided? Because when we think of Leo, we think of like divine law, divine rule. In some ways, that's a really outmoded sort of model, but that's how the kings were supposedly granted their great powers, was that they were at the top of the pyramid and they were closest to heaven, and they had this crown which was symbolic of the opening of the crown chakra, and the crown chakra would allow them to receive the wisdom and the bounty and the guidance and the channeling of heaven, right? And as their role as stewards of the people, that they were supposed to bring that into everyday life. When you read Confucius, that's exactly what Confucian philosophy is about. It's about rulership and leadership and being able to convey the will of heaven. And if you don't do that, if you can't do that, guess what happens? Then your land suffers, your crops suffer. And this is all King Arthur, right? This is the fall of Avalon. This is Eliot. This is T.S. Eliot and the Wasteland, right? It's exactly, sort of the downside. This is when the Piscean age begins to tip downward. That's when Eliot writes about the Wasteland. I think Eliot might have been a Pisces, although don't hold me to that. I know Yeats was. Anyway, so this idea of being, sort of divinely guided or divine ordination, really each and every one of us has that inside of ourselves. And what's interesting is when we look at Regulus, which is the most royal of the royal stars, and we'll look at that tonight. Just before Donald Trump became president, Regulus changed signs, and it went from Leo to Virgo. It went to 0 Virgo, which is where it is now. And really what that meant is that the time of kings was over. And it's interesting that Trump would come in and he would have his ascendant, which is what, a 28 Leo, and his Mars is at what, 27 Leo or 26 Leo. So Trump's going to go through his Mars return, which I talked about. That will signal, by the way, the return of Trump, not to the White House per se, but you'll see the return of Trump. They're going to try to do something with him. I mean, look, Trump is part of he's part of the gang. He's part of the crew. Okay, he's part of it. If you don't think he is, then you need to wake up and smell the amyl nitrate. He is. Now that doesn't mean that everybody all plays together in lockstep all the time. They don't. And I've talked about this before, that a lot of the groups that we see tend to operate as crime families. And there's a radio show that I listen to, and one of their refrains is that if you want to learn everything, I think it comes from maybe James Fetzer, I could be wrong. If you want to know everything you need to know about how the world is run, just watch Godfather 1 and Godfather 2. It's all in there. So when we deal with like the Clintons, or we deal with the Bushes, or we deal with the Trumps, or we deal with the Rothschilds, or we deal with the Rockefellers, any of these families, they are all theoretically like the Gambinos. But they're all families that are connected to sources of power. There are the 13 Illuminati families. There are the families, the black families of Venice, the 13 Saturnalian families. And so these families, these groups operate like independent crime syndicates. That's the way they are. And they have ties with each and every one of them. They do. That's how gangs operate. That doesn't always mean that they get along. It doesn't always mean that they're all on the same page, because certain mob bosses will have beefs with other mob bosses. Sometimes mob bosses get taken out. That's what happens. So we will see the return of Trump. That will have to do with his Mars return. But getting back to Regulus, right? When Regulus made that shift just by 1 degree to Virgo, that meant that the time of kings and queens and this idea of, I mean, you can even look at it from like a Hollywood perspective. Who are the new movie stars? Really, who are the new movie stars? I could name a new fucking movie star if if you put a gun to my head. I might be able to name one, maybe if I was lucky and I had a moment of clarity, but I couldn't really name you like a legitimate new movie star. Michael B. Jordan. That's about it. That's about all I can come up with. He might be a legitimate new movie star. He seems to be in every movie now. Anyway, but again, you look at that move from Regulus, which is Leo, right? We've been dealing with Leo and this idea of stars and stardom, and and the gods and goddesses of Hollywood, and even music. Look at Eric Clapton, Pluto and Leo generation, and he seems old and feeble, right? I mean, and there's no new like rock gods either. That's all gone, gone. So we don't have that. We're dealing with this idea of the people, because when you look at Leo and you look at Virgo, and I've talked about this before, Leo precedes Virgo, and there can be no king, or there can be no queen, or there can be no leader without the people. And the people comprise Virgo, and they do everything on a day-to-day basis. Everything on a day-to-day basis. Whether it's cut your lawn if they're in landscaping and lawn care, to cutting your hair, to cleaning your teeth, to making your fucking latte. I mean, that's all Virgo stuff, right? So when we had Regulus move into Virgo, it was like, okay, this is really about the people. We moved into a major paradigm shift. And what's also interesting is that, that was ultimately the message away from Trump. When faux Biden ran for president, and Kamala was his running mate, right? It was really about theoretically about the people. They had that weird kind of populist message where they were going to rebrand America and rebrand what it meant to be an American, and everybody was going to have equity and an equitable chance. I mean, that's all very much Virgo talk. Very much Virgo talk. Making America great again, and championing the country. That's real Leo talk. Even though Trump was trying to, inspire the Virgo masses, and he did a good job at that. He inspired a lot of people. Unfortunately, there was not a succession plan, and a lot of people say he'll be back by August. That's what I've heard. We'll see. I mean, that's when the sun will be on his ascendant, right? Late August. We're right around the 21st, 22nd. That's when the sun will be on his ascendant. Weirder things have happened. Stranger things have happened that can be possible. But clearly he's going to have his Mars return prior to that. And we'll see the now, between now and then, though, like I said, one of the rival gang members may want to do something with him, and make sure that he's on ice before all that happens. So this in conjunct, let's get back to the in conjunct. It's like, what do you do? What do you do? And I've been tracking the bifurcated Arise Freedom America tour, which started off with just the Arise America tour. And of course, the whole thing broke up here in the Hill Country, and Sasha Stone and Scott McKay and Lee Dundas went one way, and Robert David Steele and Trey Luz and their crew went another way. So Simon Parks had them on his show today, of course. And there was over 1,125 comments on that page. And I think I read almost every single one of them. Almost every single one of them. And what I got from most of them was this Jupiter in Pisces. Right? It's this sense that people are waking up. They're just waiting for Trump to come back. They're kind of on this, sort of post-Trump high in some ways. And they've got these street dealers out there that are continuing to, deal in hopium. But the other side of that is this Mars in conjunct. Like, well, what do you do? What do you do? What do you do? How do you make it happen? How do you come into your own kind of sovereign sense of being? right? Like, to be perfectly honest with you, we are living with a completely, utterly sociopathic and psychopathological form of rulership and government on this planet right now, that even the highest fumes of hope may not be able to cut through it. I mean, that's really kind of where we are. When you step back and look at what's happened and what's continuing to happen and what might continue to happen, which I'm going to talk about, the prospect of all of this is utterly alarming. It's alarming. And you've got a group of people now who we all know that may not necessarily respond to reality that the way that they've been responding to reality before, because they've had an intervention, they've had a medical intervention. We have to factor that into the equation as well. So it's great to be kind of, high on rebellion, or at least high on the sense that people are waking up. But unless you have the Mars factor there, it ain't shit. You've got to have a Mars factor involved, right? So this is going to be an interesting Mars cycle, especially since it's starting off with the moon kind of right there together. And this inconjunct, the inconjunct isn't just with Jupiter, right? We also have a Venus inconjunct with Saturn. So we have these two principles, the masculine principle with Mars and the feminine principle with Venus. And they're both looking to complete some kind of a circuit. With Venus, we're dealing with relationship. And, with it being in Cancer, we're dealing with our relationship with caring, with nurturing, with the feminine, with growing things, right? Things that feed us, whether they're relationships or whether they're our relationship with nurturing itself. And we have this inconjunction right now with Saturn. It's like, okay, what are we talking about? We're talking about inflation and shortages and things like that. And we have these nurses again, like these nurses who are Cancerian, they're Venus. Most of them are women, not all of them are women. In the inconjunct with Saturn, and Saturn in Aquarius, which is this kind of hardcore scientific rule of law, just like fucking Fauci. If you doubt me, you doubt the science. And how dare you doubt the science? How dare you doubt this third person personification of what science is? I'm the incarnation of science. And so we have this inconjunct here with Venus, and that has a lot to do with trust. It has a lot to do with trust. Where's the trust factor here? So we're dealing with empowerment, right? Empowerment in Leo, and hooking it up to this engine of expectancy and potentiality, which is Jupiter. It's like, yeah, man, breathe in the hope, and the masks are coming down. We got them on the run. Read the emails. Fauci's going down. Gates is going down. We got them on the run. But what do we do, right? Where do we go from here? Because I guarantee you don't want this fucking thing happening again. And I haven't even gotten into where I think it's going to go. But that's the inconjunct with Jupiter. And the inconjunct with Venus to Saturn is our relationship, right, with caring and nurturing in this unresolved quincunx, this inconjunct with Saturn and Aquarius. Cold, authoritative, domineering. Don't question it. Just don't fucking question it. We're going to have Mars. So check this out. So Mars, in what is that going to be? 2 weeks. 2 weeks from now, Mars begins to move. As Saturn's moving backwards, Mars is moving forwards, right? It's going to be a very interesting kind of tilt with that energy. And Mars and Leo will have the upper hand here. I'm telling you right now, it's going to have the upper hand because we're going to see Saturn retreat. We're going to see Saturn move away from this dominant position. Remember, Saturn went into Aquarius right after all this shit hit the fan. So we're seeing this retreat now, and we're seeing these polar opposition energies come into play. Really interesting stuff. Really interesting. 2 weeks from now, when Mars really begins to move into a tighter aspect with that opposition with Saturn. It's a pitchfork in torches moment. I guarantee you, pitchfork and torches. The other thing too is, remember I talked about that soccer player who collapsed. Mars rules athletes in Leo. People on what? On stages. On stages. People performing. So we're probably going to see some of this as a result in the opposition with Saturn and the impact that a one-size-fits-all decision is going to have on a group of people, especially people that are in the public eye. That's coming. Guarantee you. Venus is going to move forward over the next few weeks. We're going to have a Venus-Pluto opposition. Again, it's going to reach some level of critical mass. The more stories that we hear, the more fact-based evidence that we see, which is not supporting the commonly held narrative about certain things being good for you and I, is going to reach a high point in 2 weeks with this Venus-Pluto opposition and this Mars-Saturn opposition. That's when things get tricky. That's when the narrative changes. And I'm going to talk about that. So we're talking right around the end of July. So where are we now? Right around the end of July, 2 weeks from now. We move into the 4th of July. That's a critical period. Critical period. We're going to have a Venus-Mars conjunction. That's going to happen. That's going to happen during CyberPolygon. And that's a chart that I'm going to bring up. We're going to look at CyberPolygon, what I think it means, and what I think we have to look forward to during the summer. This hot summer where we've already seen companies theoretically be hijacked by ransomware. One was a pipeline company. Two was a meat processing company. Theoretically, it's all done by the Russians, which we know is a bunch of bullshit. It looked like the Russians really are going to put their money in a fake fucking Bitcoin account that the FBI set up for them. Really? Really? Oh yeah, here we go. We're going to set up this. Here, this is the money drop. This is what they did with the pipeline stuff. It was oh yeah, here's the Bitcoin wallet. Just put it right in there. Yeah, well that was the FBI's fucking Bitcoin wallet, okay? Like some Russian hacker is really going to fall for that stupid shit. And if that was the case, if really that was the case, and Russia did do that to our pipeline, that's an act of war. That's a total act of war. So why wouldn't faux Biden, go after Russia? Like that's an attack on infrastructure. And I don't care if it's a private entity inside of Russia or not, which it's not. But if it was, it's like, fuck you. We're gonna take down your Nord Stream. It's done. But we know that that's not the case. Because if it was the case, then that would have happened. Anyway, so I'm gonna get into this CyberPolygon stuff. Why don't we just go there now? Because I think this is really what the next phase is about. That's BlackRock's chart. That's Israel's chart. We'll get there. Okay, so this is the chart for CyberPolygon. This is the event that's happening. It's July 9th, and 12:15 p.m. is when they started it last year. That's when the opening address hit the airwaves, right? They streamed it. So I'm assuming same time this year. So this is pretty much roughly going to be the chart for CyberPolygon. Now, if you look at the website, the CyberPolygon website, which comes through, by the way, the Great Reset, Klaus Schwab, Davos, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It talks about where things are headed. And his address from last year gets into how COVID was, how technology allowed people to deal with and navigate through COVID, right? So they're praising technology and the role that technology will play moving forward. And remember, Frank Juice was the guy's name from Uranium One and Lionsgate. Anyway, if all those connections with Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan and Russia were really, really big last year during CyberPolygon. I don't know, they haven't announced this year's sponsors yet. I haven't been able to look it up, but you can usually kind of tell where they're putting their energy, where they want to put their emphasis and focus by, because they want to develop that area. They want to bring that area, into the global stage for a number of different reasons. All right, so here's the here's the chart. So we have some interesting conjunctions straight out of the gate. We've got the Venus-Mars conjunction, which I talked about, and I've talked about in the past. People that have Venus and Mars in their chart tend to be in the same sign, conjunct, tend to be kind of androgynous. They have an interesting, sometimes unusual kind of androgyny to them. Women tend to look a bit more masculine, men tend to be a bit more effeminate, although they can shift. It's this kind of shape-shifty energy between the masculine and the feminine with Venus and Mars. And two of the examples that I gave was one, Greta Thunberg, who has a Venus-Mars conjunction in Scorpio, she looks like a boy, honestly. She looks like a boy. And then the other Venus and Mars conjunction that I talked about and have talked about is Jeffrey Epstein, who kind of looks like a woman at times, very feminine. So, there's some of this involved here, just in general. But we can see that there's kind of this amassing of power, and it's in the 11th house, which tends to be like the internet. The 11th house is the internet. The 11th house is social, it's groups. So we see this kind of amassing of power. And Leo's traditional power. It's not like Virgo. It's not like, see Regulus right there at 0 Virgo. It's not like that. This is traditional power. This is the power of kings and queens dominating right here the net space. And guess what? Opposing Saturn and squaring off against Uranus. My sense here is that CyberPolygon is going to kick something off. It is going to kick off whatever's going to happen this summer around power. Power, heat. Of course, we already talked about Mars, Leo, the conjunction with the moon, starting right off that 0, 1, 1, 1 being Mars, the moon being 0, like a hot summer, right? The sun, the power of the sun. We're going to see that. We're going to have a hot summer. We're going to see rolling blackouts. It can get very weird. Very weird. And if I'm not mistaken, let me just do this one little query here. Pretty sure that my timing is spot on with this. Okay, so let me just show you. Here's what we have. On the 2nd of July, just before the 4th of July, we have the final, theoretically, the final installment of the Purge series, the Forever Purge, where instead of one day, you get to purge for a long fucking time, right? So that's happening. That's happening just 7 days before CyberPolygon, and then 2 days before the 4th of July. And remember, this year, they're not going to have fireworks at Mount Rushmore. They may not even have fireworks in Washington, D.C., that means they're going to have dark skies. Think about that. Dark skies. No rockets, red glare on 4th of July this year. At least not there. Not in the places where theoretically freedom reigns. Okay, so this is going to be on the heels after it by 7 days with the Forever Purge, and then 4 days after 4th of July. But this has all the elements here of chaos. Pure chaos, right? Pure chaos. Mars, Venus in the 11th house, even though it's theoretically, traditional sort of ruling power, the 11th house is like the house of the people. Now, the 11th house is the house of the mob. And we have the square with Uranus in the opposition in Saturn, which is in the 5th house. Well, remember, this is just kicking this thing off here, right? So Saturn in the 5th house, I got to tell you right now, is no fun. It is no fun. Whatever comes out of CyberPolygon, no fun, baby. Like the Iggy Pop song, no fun. Not a fun summer for you. But with Mars and Venus in the 11th house, right, this is where the action is going to be. But it is not balanced action at all. It is not creative. It is destructive. Because we also have the square with Uranus going on at the same time. And we're still dealing with the Uranus-Saturn square. And we will be. It's going to be part of the astrological narrative for a while. So I think CyberPolygon kicks off this period during the summer where it's going to be really hot. We're going to have blackouts. We're going to have rolling blackouts, and things could get really fucking weird. Really weird. And if you've never if you've never looked at the history of the blackout in New York City in 1977, I highly recommend you look at that. You watch that document. There's a documentary on the blackout in New York City, 1977. It is brutal. It's the birth of hip hop too, by the way. If you're not aware of that. So what happened, they had this blackout and just absolute lawlessness. And people were breaking into audio stores and pawn shops, and they were stealing all kinds of like audio gear and turntables and speakers and amplifiers. It was ugly. It was really, really ugly. And family businesses were ruined. Absolutely ruined. I remember seeing this woman and her husband. They had a sporting goods store. It was, I think it might have been in the Bronx, and they just trashed their store, stole everything. It was kind of a precursor to what happened like last summer. And this was a business that served the community. And once the lights went out, it was, you didn't want to be in New York City unless you were thieving. But anyway, they stole a bunch of turntables, and they stole a bunch of amps and speakers, and not long after that, the whole hip hop thing starts to blow up. So the blackout in 1977 helped birth hip hop, if you weren't aware of that. But watch the documentary, because you don't get. This would be like the New York blackout. On scolopamine or some shit like that, right? I mean, just be really bad. And we have this moon here right at that time. It is about as balsamic as it can get. It's not a new moon. And this idea again of the moon in Cancer would be kind of feminine, or it's just not there. It's sort of like this old model, right? This old moon, this old, outdated, archaic sort of way of caring. It's just fermented at this point. There's nothing left. So by the time CyberPolygon is over, guess what? That moon will be entering into the sign of Leo, and will ultimately catch up with Venus and Mars. And again, it's kind of, you know, it's this end of this kind of nostalgia in some ways. It's a very interesting day astrologically because of these two conjunctions. And then we have this midheaven at 1 Cancer. And again, it's an interesting degree, because if you look at the symbol for 0 Cancer in the Sabian symbols, the symbol is on a ship at sea, a sailor lowers one flag and raises another. It is a classic symbol of a false flag. Now, I'm not saying that a false flag is going to happen on July 9th, 2021, but the symbolism of a false flag happening is right there. And we saw that same degree play a huge role in COVID-19, right? We saw that symbol right at 1 degree, 0 degrees, and then it went into Gemini. And when it went into Gemini, what happened? It was the summer of Floyd. The summer of Floyd going into Gemini. And we've been dealing with dualistic universe in a big way ever since. So it's a very interesting degree. It is kind of like, you know, it was that period of COVID where it was still kind of quaint. You know, people were at home with their kids and they're like, oh man, this is great. 2 weeks of this, I can handle 2 weeks of this. The NFL had their draft, and you know, everybody was, and all the GMs were at home with their kids, except for Bill Belichick. And you know, that was it. That was like the height of it, and then it shifted. Boom. We went into a completely different universe as soon as those nodes changed. So that's the degree of the midheaven here. Is that really the height of sort of the cozy time of COVID? And Mercury is really at that place where, when the node shifted, right? It's really kind of at that degree. Like, was it 26? It's 26. You know, when everything starts to get really weird, and we have the Mercury-Neptune square. Lies, 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 right? Lies, 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 falsehoods, fabrication. So you can rest assured we're going to hear, you know, more bullshit coming out of the mouth of Klaus Schwab. And again, the 9th house, this is all about what's out there. Some foreign country, some other place, right? The rule of law being determined by somebody from another, you know, another kind of locale/ideology. And look at Uranus in the 8th house. And that in and of itself is like kind of daunting. You know, this house that's hidden and occulted, and Uranus here in Taurus, and Taurus not even in its own house. And this is Scorpio's house. And this is when, you know, Taurus, at this time, Taurus is ruling this house, which means that there's chaos. There's chaos in the underworld. There's chaos with the economy too, by the way. This is economic chaos. I can tell you that right now, right? Economic chaos. Keep your eye on the crypto market for damn sure during this time. Because they're going to want to, they're going to, you know, who knows, they may come out of this CyberPolygon thing with a complete, you know, drill going live about banking. That could happen. That could, just be prepared. I'm telling you, you got to be on your toes this summer. That means that you've got to make sure that you have some tangible assets on hand with you, just in case the old ATM shuts down. I wouldn't put it past these people, by the way. What would happen? What would happen if people weren't able to get their entitlements? What would happen if the WIC cards stopped operating? What do you think would happen? You'd have people going fucking nuts. I'm telling you, right? And this T-square really, in my estimation, has the fingerprints of that kind of potentiality. I mean, look at this. This is when it's happening, 12/15, July 9th. We know this is the chart. We know it. Absolutely know it. And even here with the South Node in the third house being communication, right? Ideas. And with the South Node, we just seen lawlessness with the South Node in Sagittarius. That shit has been clear from day one once the true node went into Gemini. I guess with Jupiter here, I mean, we got a trine with, I don't know, it's retrograding, it's moving away. We've got a sextile with Saturn and Chiron, still not all that encouraging. And then you have the sun and the moon in sextile with Uranus, right? But this is the power. This is the 10th house. This is the power structure of the 10th house, meeting in Davos, tapping into whatever Uranus is. Now, I suppose that on a personal level, if you're paying attention to what I'm saying now, you could be apprised of whatever could happen here, and you might be okay with it. And you could take advantage of the chaos in your own way. I don't know what that would mean without being, completely lawless. But who knows? Maybe there might be some interesting financial opportunities during this time. Now, what's clear is that it's all going to sound nice with the true node in Libra. I'm sorry, with the ascendant in Libra. It'll sound nice. It'll have all the pleasant and diplomatic kinds of verbiage that's associated with an event like this. But it's just a cover. That's all it is. It's just a cover. This T-square is pretty dramatic. It's pretty fucking dramatic. So this is CyberPolygon. This is really what's going to be kicking off the summer in a lot of ways. And as we cycle out of what's been happening with COVID-19, and as Fauci begins to do the perp walk, and the United States buys up all these vaccines, which they're just going to donate to third world countries who won't fucking use them. They won't use them. They know better. They've been getting hit with vaccines and needles for decades. They know full well who fucking Bill Gates is. They're not going to take them. So those vaccines are going to go to waste. It's just a way for the United States to look really good on the global stage and have Biden, be this, sylvan patriarch of goodwill and making sure that the rest of the world is taken care of. Meanwhile, our tax dollars will, get spent on all these vaccines, which will never make it, thankfully, into the arms of people in third world countries, unless, of course, they incentivize them, in which case, who knows? But there you go. There's your devil's triangle right there. CyberPolygon kicking it off on the heels of the Forever Purge and the dark skies of the 4th of July. Okay, let's look at Israel's chart. That's BlackRock. We'll end with BlackRock. Let's look at Israel's chart. So Israel is going through some changes. And I started looking at its chart a while ago, like a couple of weeks ago. And one of the things that caught my attention is the true node in Taurus and the conjunction of Uranus with the true node. Now, Israel's a pretty young theoretical country, even though it has no geographical borders. Did you know that? It has no geographical borders, but it does have 2 stripes on its flag, 2 blue stripes. One stripe is the Tigris, and the other is the Euphrates. And the space in between is supposedly the land that God deeded to the nation state of Israel in the Bible. Right? That's what that flag represents. So it's a pretty young country, 1948, May 14th. It has not even gone through its Uranus return. not gone through its Uranus. That's how young it is, okay? There are people older than Israel that have gone through their Uranus return. My mother has gone through her Uranus return. Okay? So that means two things. Number one, that we're going to see a change, obviously, with Uranus and Taurus. Boom. Uranus has never hit the true node of Israel before. This is the first time. So what is the true node in Israel all about? Well, number one, in Taurus, it is about the acquisition of physical resources, material resources. That's how the true node in Taurus operates. So Israel is going to have its nodal return, but a lot is going to happen before it has its nodal return, and I'll show you. Now, in the seventh house, theoretically, it should also represent partnerships, having partners. That's what the true node represents in the seventh house, having partners. Pallas in Aries is a very different energy. Aries is aggressive. Aries is martial. Aries is warlike. So when we see Pallas here, we know that Pallas represents pattern recognition. So what is Israel as a country looking to do? It is looking for pattern recognition in relationship to other entities that is going to be very forward and very aggressive. That's what they're looking for. They're looking for aggressive opportunities or to partner with others in ways that would allow them to use their perceptual patterning in order to strengthen the bond of their partnership or relationship, theoretically speaking, right? That's how Pallas would work right there. Now, what's also interesting is that the United States has Chiron at 20 degrees Aries in its fourth house, which means that Israel's Pallas is conjunct the United States Chiron by 5 degrees. Okay, so we'll just leave that there for now. So we have the true node over here in Taurus, which is about the acquisition of resources through partnerships. We have the sun in the 10th house, also in Taurus, highlighting that same acquisition of resources, but in the 10th house, it's going about it through a very different kind of way. It's hidden, it's occulted. It's not like the sun in the second house, where by the sweat of one's brow, we'll know the fruits of their labor. No, it's being taken and carried out over here in the 8th house, hidden and occulted. What's interesting is that it is conjunct Algol. And there's always this kind of projection, that goes along with Israel, where you can't speak in a critical way about Israel. That's very Algo-esque. If you speak critically about Israel, you're an anti-Semite. You're gonna get a letter from the ADL or whatever, right? That's very Algo-esque. It's cutting off one's ability to speak. Now, here you would think that it would be, the entity itself, right, with the sun here, but that's not always the case. It could have everything to do with projection, especially because we have the Chiron opposition with the sun. And Chiron here is more aligned, even though it's leaning into the second house, it's more aligned with the first house in dealing with vulnerability and dealing with projection, things like that, right? That's how this kind of works. So here we have Black Moon Lilith, conjunct Algol, conjunct Israel's sun. This is a difficult time for Israel. And again, I'm not sure what the actual machinations behind Netanyahu's ouster, but I would assume that astrologically, the Uranus true node conjunction and this conjunction with Black Moon Lilith on Algol Israel's sun has something to do. Something behind the scenes is taking place. There's a new power, there's a new power structure, there's a new order coming into play, which is probably going to be less Zionistic and less Likudnik, and maybe more in alignment with sort of the neoliberal or the neo-Bolshevik sort of pattern of this kind of dialectic that we see. You know, because on the one hand, we have like this kind of neocon, Zionistic sort of you know, representation of nationalism and, you know, shit like that, right? And then on the other side, we have this neoliberal and neo-Bolshevik, because the neocons really are the Bolsheviks. I mean, they're the Bolsheviks. They leave Russia, they go to Mexico with Trotsky, he gets the ice pick, and they're off to the United States. They're off to Chicago. And originally they're neoliberals, then they become neocons, and now looks like the pendulum is swinging back to the neoliberalism. And maybe this has something to do with what's going on in Israel with the fall of Netanyahu. We'll see. We'll see what happens. And that means that Bolsonaro of Brazil is probably next, because Bolsonaro, Netanyahu, and Trump form this kind of trinity of sorts. And Bolsonaro is sort of the last one of this kind of, you know, nationalistic kind of, you know, leadership or nationalist figurehead, and very strong association also with Bolsonaro and Israel and Netanyahu. But by this time next year, Uranus is going to start to begin to conjunct Israel's sun, which means it's going to go through another change, another really, really big change. So the changes that are taking place with Israel are just starting. I think with the Uranus conjunction of Israel's sun, it could be cataclysmic, very cataclysmic. Now, Israel will go through its Mars return. Look where its Mars is. It's at 26 degrees. It's at the same position as Donald Trump's Mars. Isn't that interesting? That Israel and Trump have the same Mars at the same degree? Like, well, no wonder Trump became fucking president. You know, it's like, oh yeah, we've got the same, we've got the same intention. And look where the Mars is. It's conjunct Regulus. You think that they did this by chance? Hell no. No, they set this time accordingly. They wanted that Libra ascendant so that the world would view them as being balanced and fair and looking very democratic, even though it's part of the part of that Via Combusta. It's interesting. My Venus is conjunct Israel's ascendant. So if my Venus would line up right there in Israel, that might be a good place for me. It might be a good place for me. Who knows? You never know. I don't know. Maybe not. But you could, they nailed this thing, right? I mean, they totally nailed this thing for the time, because they literally wanted to be behind the scenes with the sun in the 8th house. They wanted to be behind the scenes. These people, they know astrology. They totally know astrology. If you were to go sidereal on this chart, the sun would still be in Taurus. It wouldn't be in Aries, it'd be in Taurus. And even look at where Mercury is, right? Mercury's in Gemini, kind of dualistic in the 8th house. Again, kind of hidden and a little secretive in some ways, right? And then we have Uranus in the 9th, which is radical and kind of rebellious. And here's Venus also in the 9th house, you know, theoretically a new homeland for, you know, people who want the right of return very much. We have a Venus-Neptune square, a little shaky there. And look at all the Leo, right? Look at all this Leo. Saturn in Leo, Pluto in Leo, Moon in Leo. I mean, it's fucking dominant Leo in the 10th house. In square, you know, with these other aspects. Doesn't really matter to some degree, right? But it's like, this is big energy, huge energy. Moon, Pluto conjunction, that's powerful. Possessive, obsessive, powerful. Saturn dominating in its own house here. And then Mars conjunct Regulus. This is exactly what I was talking about. But I think Israel astrologically, even Jupiter and Sagittarius conjunct the galactic center. You guys think this is by chance? Fuck no. No way. No way. They knew exactly what they were doing on this day. Look at that. Absolute trine with Mars, Jupiter. That's expansion. Total expansion. But they're going to have issues as Uranus comes in and conjuncts the sun. Huge shakeup. Huge shakeup. And when we talk about Uranus, it is really unpredictable. Now, this is a group of people, or governance that was born out of chaos. It was born out of chaos. You got the Urgan gang and the bombing of the King David Hotel and all that shit. That's chaos, man. It's absolute chaos. So what is born out of chaos will at some point resume and have to deal with chaos again. At some point, because that's how it was born. So we're going to see Uranus conjunct the sun. It's going to start again right around this time next year. It's going to be around the Israeli sun for the final decam really of Uranus transiting through Taurus. The country's going to change. How it's going to change remains to be seen. But this will not be the same country by the time Uranus completes its transit through Taurus. It will not be the same country. That's just how this stuff works. And then they're going to go through their Uranus return. And all this is going to be 8th house, which can be very, it can bring things up, it can bring a lot of stuff up, hidden from the depths, as they say. But this is clearly an intentional chart, boy, super intentional. Okay, I'm going to talk about BlackRock now, and then we're going to get out of here. So BlackRock really started to get my attention, and then I was looking, really at it with the eclipse and this whole idea of the sun, this black hole sun, and the sun being this example of this black rock in the sky, and how that it consumes negative space, right? And that I played the Soundgarden video, Black Hole Sun, which is literally sucking up people and iron filings and shit. Does it even suck up a house or two? Maybe it does. So I played that and was making some analogies with that. And so I wanted to look at BlackRock's chart. And like I said, there are 2 charts that I wanted to kind of bring up. So the first, they're both on the same day. And this is when they go public. And we have the amount of assets they have is off the charts, man. Huge amounts of assets. Like I was looking at their financials a little bit. It rivals some countries. Okay, so this is the chart for 6:30 in the morning. This is sort of the pre-market chart. Of course, we would see the sun just cross the horizon. That's what that means. So it's going to be in the first house. Guess what? Again, we have Libra rising. So we've got 3 events now where Libra rising play a role. We have CyberPolygon, we have the formation state of Israel, and we have the pre-market opening of BlackRock. Isn't that interesting? We have Cancer on the midheaven again, right? All 3, and of course we're going to have Cancer in the minute, but they're all very close by degree as well. Another kind of interesting sort of factoid. And then we have the moon in the final degrees of Gemini. And here we go, true node in Leo, more 11th house stuff, which we saw with we saw with Israel, with Mars in the 11th house in Leo, right? Okay. We saw it with CyberPolygon, Mars, Venus, 11th house in Leo, and we see the true node in Leo here. This is all pre-market. Interesting. A lot of 3rd house material, pre-market, Mars and Sag. Pluto and Sag. This is all 1999. Pluto just come into Sag in 1996. This is when, again, BlackRock came together in 1988 when Uranus was in the sign of, if I'm not mistaken, was that Sagittarius? Pretty sure it was Sagittarius. Anyway, so we have this going on here, and I'm gonna have to go back and look at 88. Pretty sure it's the end of Sagittarius. Anyway, so we have Uranus in Aquarius. Oh, that's interesting. Remember that. Remember that, because it's going to show up in a different place when we look at the market chart. What do we have here? Saturn in Taurus, Jupiter in Taurus, not quite a super conjunction, but still in the same sign. And guess what? Eighth house. More eighth house Taurus, other people's money. Correct? Boom. Big time, huge prosperity there. Saturn Venus square. It'll take the time for BlackRock to theoretically come to maturity. Here we are, 2021. We're literally 22 years into BlackRock's. What's interesting about BlackRock is that when it started in 1988, it's 33 years from when Larry Fink and this kind of group spun out from Blackstone. 33 years. 2021 is 33 years since that 1988 date. This is 22 years. So we're dealing with these kind of sequence of master numbers. And then we have the moon here, which is kind of interesting, right? On this chart, the moon is at apex. And when we think of the moon, we think of the fourth house. We think of homes, we think of real estate. And they really got their start when they were, kind of playing around, with sort of the Freddie Mac stuff. This is all sort of pre-2001, 2002. They're starting to kind of get their ducks in a row because they know what's going to happen with the housing market. They completely know. And I'm going to talk about the thing that really brought them to Wall Street. It wasn't the brain trust. It wasn't the fact that Larry Fink and Bob Capito and all these other people had all these inside and outside, relationships, which they did. They have a software called Aladdin, which is really interesting because Aladdin is a genie. It's a jinn, right? And a jinn is a spirit that you can ask to do its bidding. So they have this Aladdin software, and I don't know the complete ins and outs of this Aladdin software, but it is the backbone. It is the spine of BlackRock. It theoretically allows BlackRock to be predictive with algorithms and market trends. And that's what they opened there. That's really what they were opening with, was this company, which was going to be a financial services and management company, but it was the proprietary Aladdin software that got them onto the market and got people's attention. So again, we can see this with all this third house kind of energy, right? Data gathering, all in Sagittarius, is global. Right? This is global, it's good, global in nature. And then of course Uranus, there, and it's in trine with the sun. And we have this sextile with the South Node, which is really interesting because it almost feels like Saturn kind of activated Uranus here with BlackRock. But now that it's going retrograde, people are starting to find out about it. People are starting to understand, this is a fucking Death Star. BlackRock, when I started to, all right, that's not really the right kind of way to start this next bit. Back in, when was that? Shit, it was right around this time. It was right around this time, in 1999. It's exactly this time. I didn't have a place to live. I did not have a place to live. I was living in this warehouse in Berkeley, and they were turning the warehouse over to, they were doing something else. This is Richard Grossinger, North Atlantic Books. I was living in Richard's warehouse, and they're going to do something else with the warehouse, so I had to leave. And I had been there for 2 years in this warehouse. And I had no place to go. I was like fucking just floating around. And I remember I had come across this book called Handbook for a New Paradigm. And there are a whole series of these little handbooks. And apparently George Green was involved with these books. And I only read the first one. And it was supposedly channeled, but I'm telling you, man, that Handbook for a New Paradigm just blew my circuitry wide open. And one of the things that they talked about in Handbook for a New Paradigm was that, and as I've got the black sun behind me, is that they being sort of the dark magicians of this world, were working on a technology that would essentially create an anti-universe. Like the idea was to usurp God and to create an antimatter universe. That was the audacity of the dark magicians of this world, to create this universe of antimatter. And I remember driving around for basically October, November, December, 3 months, right? And just being, trying to get my feet underneath me during this time. And eventually wound up getting into the .com world in January. And it was in .com for 5 years after that. But I was just floating around Northern California. It was a weird time. And this book, this little tiny book, Handbook for a New Paradigm, was just rocking my world. This idea of this antimatter universe. And when I look at BlackRock and I look at kind of what their mission is now, I'm like, this is what they're doing. They're inverting physical reality, right? That's their job. They are the Death Star that's been commissioned. And when you go to their website, they talk all about fucking equity and a net zero economy. This is what they've been tasked to do. That they want to completely invert this idea of home ownership, the nuclear family. This is what BlackRock has been positioned to do. They brought BlackRock into the government. They put them right in between the Fed and the Treasury Department. And they're basically getting printed fiat money. We're paying for BlackRock. We're paying for BlackRock to go out and basically gobble up huge amounts of real estate right now. We're paying for that. We're giving them, theoretically, we're giving them our tax dollars, which, I mean, it's never going to be paid back, obviously. But it's going against this, this money magic ledger sheet. So this is what they're doing. They are creating this version of an antimatter universe, because the fourth industrial revolution and the Great Reset is an antimatter principle. You will own nothing and you will never be happier, right? That is antimatter. That is anti-material. It's also anti-spiritual, by the way, but it is anti-material. You will own nothing and you will be happy. We will be your gods and we will own everything. And if you want something, you're going to have to get on your fucking hands and knees and come to us. So BlackRock is carrying this out. BlackRock is inverting physical reality. It's exactly what they're doing. Exactly what they're doing. All right, let me show you the other chart. So this is when they rang the bell. It was time for them to hit the market. What's this one? All right. So there we go. Now I found this to me, this really got my attention. The other chart is interesting. Don't get me wrong. So you got Jupiter and Saturn, 8th house. We're looking at this as like two parts of the same whole. So when the market opened that day, it was 9:30 a.m. in the morning, Scorpio rising. Darkness, right? Look what we have here. Oh yeah, there's Uranus right there on the cusp of the 4th house. What is that? That is residential. That is the housing market. That's what really they got into, right? They developed this Aladdin software so that they could theoretically get on board all those negatively amortized mortgages, all that bad paper. That's what brought them into the marketplace. And there they are, the Iranian Death Star right there. So they got activated. When Saturn hit Uranus, that's when they moved in. That's when they started to go into, and look where Jupiter is. Jupiter's expanding their reach into the fourth house. They're expanding, right? Well, Jupiter's going to retrograde. Saturn is retrograding. Saturn, people are onto them now. Now, what the fuck you're going to do about them? Who knows? Because they are wedged in. Getting rid of BlackRock is going to, it's like, you know, it'd be really interesting for fucking Bernie Sanders to talk about BlackRock. Let's see what Bernie Sanders would have to say about BlackRock. I bet he wouldn't say shit about BlackRock. And this is the exact same, this is the exact thing that Bernie Sanders rails about, or even little Robert Rubin, who every single day couldn't wait to get his teeth into Trump. Do you think he's going to get into BlackRock? Oh, I seriously doubt it. But with this Saturn retrograde, it's going to be interesting to see what happens, because it is going to cross their south node, and they're on the radar now. Like, they are on the radar, because people understand that they're being outbid by fucking BlackRock, okay? And they've got their tentacles everywhere. I was talking with a buddy of mine, Michael, a good friend of the show. He told me that they actually have an interest in the shopping center across the house, across the road from where my mother lives. And the other people that are in that partnership with BlackRock, they want to sell, but BlackRock wants to hold. Well, why do they want to hold? Why do they want to hold? Because it's within proximity. It's within proximity of, guess what? A bunch of seniors. A bunch of seniors who have institutional wealth. They are within a stone's throw of a bunch of seniors with institutional wealth. And I don't think they want to give up their position. They're in that shopping center for whatever reason. So, True Node and Leo, look at that, right at the top of the chart. Right at the top of the chart. You're going to do whatever they want, right? Unimpeded. There's that moon at the 29th degree, anaretic. Gemini, again, we're dealing with the fourth house, hidden, occulted. Rule of the fourth house, hidden and occulted. Gemini duality. Boom. Right there. And they're making tracks, man. They're making tracks. But they're going to be found out. You know, what's interesting, too, about Israel, Israel's going to have its nodal return, but it's also going to have the south node on Chiron. And guess what? These fellows right here, they're going to have the south node on Chiron, too. And it's going to be next year. And it's going to be very interesting to see what happens when they have that south node conjunction with Chiron in their chart in dealing with Sagittarius. They've got friends in high places, obviously. But you know, that's going to be law related. Definitely law related. Yeah, Mercury, 12th house. Again, hidden. Sun in the 11th. Very, very social. Connections, networks. Early Libra, first decan Libra. Lots of deals, right? Libra makes deals. So this is for, you know, for what they're doing, man, this is a great fucking chart. Saturn in the 7th, accidental exaltation in the 7th. But they're going to have Uranus conjunct their Saturn too. That's going to be coming quite soon. And so that'll be easily by in 2 weeks, 2-3 weeks, about a month from now, Uranus Saturn conjunction. So keep your eye on BlackRock. They're not impenetrable and they're not infallible. They're not impenetrable. They're very powerful. Don't get me wrong. This is a very powerful institution, and they've got a lot of politicians in their back pocket. And they could pull the plug on any number of things, and they could probably start the economy in a free fall because they're that connected, okay? But I think they're going to come under some heat here with the Uranus conjunction to Saturn, and then Saturn conjuncting their own Uranus, and also the South Node. So the next month or so, let's just call it the next 2 months. Well, even up until like the end of the year, when Saturn comes back and begins to conjunct the South Node again, because it's going to hit that South Node twice, like once almost now, and then another by the end of the year. It's going to be very interesting. Very, 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 very interesting. See what happens to the old BlackRock here. They may be powerful. They may be the Death Star, but they're not impenetrable. Ultimately, they're not impenetrable. They're not impenetrable. And they're on the radar now. What we do about them, who knows? Who knows? Larry Fink is a Scorpio, by the way. So I think his sun is going to be right here in the first house. I think he's like November 13th. I think that's when he's born. So right there. Yeah. So if you're going to have your number one guy for your company, and it's going to be, at 9:30 in the morning on a Friday to have their opening, boom, you're going to want a Scorpio first house with that dude's sun in the first house. And if I'm not mistaken, he's got huge, like big Taurus in his chart. I think I looked at his chart. So astrologically, in terms of executive flow chart, he's probably the guy that you, as BlackRock, would want to have running your show for whatever that's worth. So this is interesting. This is a very, very interesting chart, right? And we can just see how Saturn just got activated, boom, right in that 13th degree. So that's when they went in. That's when they started to become this Death Star with the residential real estate market. Very interesting stuff. Super interesting. Okay. Let me check in with you guys. We're going for 2.5 hours, so I'm about ready to get out of here. Let's see what's up in your world. What's going on with you, YouTube? Let's see. We got a lot of liberals are leaving the left coast and paying lots of cash for their homes in the South. Yep, sure are. I realize the economic crash will not be televised. BlackRock is making opportunity zones at light speed. Catherine Austin Fitz. Only real estate has value. That's right. Most cities are ports. Destroy a city and use port. Build new cities in new ways. Corey's days just did a big article in BlackRock. A rock can be detonated into gravel. Yeah. Black Pebble, right? Absolutely. Hey, Charles, good to see you. When they get the latest update from the TV, they forget we live in a scripted world, or so they think. What else do we have? We're all such hypocrites, burning like little shares in BlackRock. I totally agree with you. Yep. I'd agree. Lux Chameleon, I forgot about that bit, Ronnie. It's weird. I've noticed this happening so much, so many people not remembering history. It has to do with people not researching. Bernie is and always has been a commie. He's what they call a Neiman Marxist. He's a Neiman Marxist. That's what he is. So is Robert Rubin. Let's see what else we have here. Hey, Lana, what's going on? Good to see you. Let's see. Hi, Nathaniel. Nice to see you over here. Let's see. Anybody else? Anybody else? Anybody else? Anybody else? That I haven't seen, recognized. Susie Gemini. They love to use their gematria. Yeah, I think Bibi Netanyahu was Antichrist in gematria. BlackRock sounds like a shady corporation from a sci-fi book or a movie. Yes, it does. Absolutely. Okay. Thank you for admitting. You're welcome. Even genies need someone sometime. Oh, that's true. They do. Absolutely. Okay. I think we're out of here. All right, we'll be back tomorrow. We'll get into the nitty gritty over on the other channel. You guys know what the other channel is. There's my man, Michael's sister Nina. What's going on, brother? Good to see you. All right, let me get out of here. It looks like Welsh Roses still has her GoFundMe if you want to help her out and help her reach escape velocity from where she is now to go to Idaho to go live with Owen Benjamin. Give her a hand. Hi, Beth. Good to see you. Hi, Sheila. Scrubbies. What's going on, Tamara? Nice to see you as well. All right. Love you all. Use your head in order to discern what's real. Your heart to set what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. Thank you for joining me tonight. And meet me over on 15 minutes of